Welcome into the Michigan Football Report. We've got a great show. Trust me today. Great show. Before we get started, I've got to ask you guys to help me out. Get us to our goal. YouTube said, James, you got to get to 6,000 subscribers as soon as possible so you can now be considered in the big leagues of YouTube channels. I don't even know what that means, but we got to get there. 5,400, just one shy of 5,400, so you can be that number 5,400 if you want. But help us get to 6,000. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do so now. We've got an awesome show coming for you, starting right now. Is Chris Evans coming back to the Wolverines? Michigan's never really starting running back, but certainly high contributing running back for 3 seasons from 2016. Got off to a hot start. First game, I think he had a 50-yard touchdown run. 17, 18, big-time contributor. Suspended from the team, from school. No one really knows. Sounds like an academic suspension. We've talked about it for nearly a year now. Is he returning for the team in 2020? I'm giving this one 3 Harbaugh heads, folks. Pretty likely that Chris Evans, who, when you see his career stats that we're going to show here in a moment, they're a lot higher than I would have remembered, honestly. But here's the tweet he put out yesterday. Chris Evans, by the way, if you search Chris Evans on Twitter or on Google, you always get the same random actor. I don't even know who this guy is. Maybe he was Superman at one point. You got to change your name from Kid and Play ABC123. Just change it to like Chris Evans Go Blue or something. It's easier to find you. Nevertheless, quotes here, 2020 vision. Not really sure what this meant at first, but a bunch of Michigan football players started quote tweeting him. That tweet accompanied with this photo of him in a Michigan football uniform, kind of looking into the future, baby. He's seeing some sun in his eyes, right? The future is bright. And then I checked out his profile, and I don't remember this being there 6 months ago, a couple weeks ago. Last time I checked, I can't really tell you when that was. But you see his description. He's a student athlete at the University of Michigan. Well, if you're not in the team, you're a student athlete. And then he's got the 2020 Michigan down there. I don't think that's a mistake. I don't think that's a joke that that's a mistake that his profile photo is still him in a Michigan uniform. So what we've been able to ascertain over the last day or so since this tweet was put out is that he had an academic suspension hearing to appeal his status as a student at the school, and apparently it would seem he won it, and now it's up to Jim Harbaugh since technically he wasn't kicked off the football team for football or reasons pertaining to that. He was deemed ineligible by the university to be an interscholastic athlete, and nevertheless, he could be coming back to the Michigan football team. And if you look at his stats, I'll tell you what, I was pretty surprised for a guy who was never Michigan starting running back to have 1,700 yards, 14 touchdowns in 3 seasons. Didn't have a redshirt season or anything like that, so it's not like these are a redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore. This is straight from out of high school. 1,700 yards, and he's not too shabby through the air. 40 catches for your backup running back. 400 yards receiving, about 10 yards per catch, and a couple touchdowns. So bringing Chris Evans back in the 2020 season, I think could be a pretty big boost. That's why we're giving it 3 Harbaugh heads. But will it be as a running back with Michigan? I do not know yet. So we're going to talk about what the depth chart will look like with Chris Evans next year from a running back perspective here in just a moment. But before we do that, I wanted to make sure you guys download and use My TV Choice. We've talked about them before. Should be no surprise, My TV Choice. Many of you are using them. If you're not, chatsports.com/MyTV. Next time you watch a Michigan game, if you watch Alabama LSU this weekend, any NFL, you just download the app for your iPhone, connect it to your Wi-Fi, set it down, it takes over. When the game goes to commercial, you get awesome sports video from Chat Sports, some other awesome sources. The game comes back on, automatically back to it. Eliminates commercials. My TV Choice, chatsports.com/MyTV. Go download it today. You will not regret doing so. Let's take a look now at that depth chart. This is what I think the depth chart will look like without Chris Evans. Had he never come back, he never been a factor in 2020. I think Hassan Haskins has established himself as your starting running back, but I think it's a 1A, 1B kind of thing with Zach Charbonnet. Who's the young man there to the right with the chain and not a tie? That is Blake Corum out of the Baltimore area, Michigan's top running back recruit, certainly, but maybe some people say Michigan's top offensive recruit in the 2020 class. The stats and the highlights I've been seeing him in his senior year here in 2019, I think he's a heck of a lot better than Christian Turner, who will be back on the roster. So I think Corum would be your third running back would not be a candidate to redshirt. So if Chris Evans does come back, does he fit in with this group? Could he even see the field? Maybe, but could his contribution to Michigan as a fifth-year senior be as a wide receiver, be as a slot wide receiver, or be in a role that Michigan doesn't really seem to have, which is a guy who can go out and catch passes, or someone who could take carries out of the shotgun from next year's quarterback. So I actually think if he came back, you're not going to consider Chris Evans to be a running back in the true sense. I think in the new offense from Michigan, even though it hasn't gone as smoothly as we all liked it, I think he'd be more of a guy who would be just as likely to go out and catch a pass as he would to get a handoff from under center or from the shotgun formation. So Chris Evans coming back, 3 Harbaugh heads. Had I had more time to dig in and talk to some sources, we could have given it a 4 Harbaugh heads, FACK. But for now, this is seeming pretty likely that he will be returning to the team. So I ask you guys this question. Who will be Michigan's starting running back, the old RB1, next year in 2020 if Chris Evans returns to the team? Zach Charbonnet, Hassan Haskins, or could it be your fifth-year man, Chris Evans, coming off a 1-year suspension for academic reasons? Let's just say that. Answer below in the comments. I'm still going to stick with Hassan Haskins, but you never know. Chris Evans certainly brings a lot of experience and a lot of talent back to this Michigan team should he be brought back on. So that is the word on Chris Evans. How about the Michigan offensive staff? Since we're in a bye week, I have been in the film room just recording my screen all day of what's going on. I've been putting film on there. I've been recording videos, sending them to people just because I want to get a sense of what's really going on with Michigan in this offense. And the more I started looking at it, talk to some people who are reasonable, I actually am not going out on the Josh Gattis isn't the right fit or it's not working limb, as much as I am kind of wondering if it's because of the offensive coaching staff just as much as maybe Gattis. So I'm giving this one 3 Harbaugh heads. That was the biggest mistake of the offseason for Jim Harbaugh, not allowing an offensive coordinator to pick his own staff, because Josh Gattis, 36 years old, I believe it is, he came on and took over basically for Pep Hamilton, who wasn't the true offensive coordinator, but really was. And this is the staff he was left with. And we're going to talk about their experience. So Sherrone Moore, 1-year experience in the spread offense at Central Michigan, mind you. And then leaving on there. Jay Harbaugh, Michigan's running backs coach, has no experience in the spread offense. He was when he was a grad assistant at Oregon State. That was a West Coast. Went to the Ravens before they were running anything innovative like they are now. I'm not sure even what they do is call a spread. Ben McDaniels, no spread experience. Now Ed Warner, which maybe being Ed Warner being on the staff is a problem for the dynamic of this staff with Josh Gattis. I don't know. Longtime spread OC at Kansas, at Notre Dame, at Ohio State, where he was the co-OC on a national championship team. Is there too many, is Ed Warner maybe a cook in the kitchen that's not necessary? I don't know. But the question needs to be asked, does Gattis need his own staff? Because if you're trying to run an offense and have wide receivers run routes and run plays, if you're trying to have quarterbacks read certain things in the RPO, if you're trying to have offensive linemen block for a style that you like, shouldn't you bring in guys that know how to coach for that? So what I'm kind of starting to think about now with it 9 games in is, has Josh Gattis had to teach his assistant coaching staff about what he's trying to do just as much as his players? And I don't think it's a crazy question to think about here, folks. Under 400 yards of offense, bottom half of the country, bottom third of the country, right? Around bottom third of the country, almost bottom third of the country. Number 80 in passing. Number 60 in rushing, and that's only gotten better with the Notre Dame game a few weeks ago. And 32 points a game, number 51 in the country. If this was 2001, these might be some okay stats, but in 2019, these are the absolute middle-of-the-road average stats that you're going to get out of a college football offense, specifically one that's ranked in the top 15 as a team in the country. So Michigan, one of the few teams out there ranked in the top 15 with offensive stats like that. So think about that. When Michigan gets on the field next week against Michigan State, think about when they play Ohio State, win or loss, and if they go into the offseason, if Josh Gattis returns, maybe he doesn't want to come back to Michigan, I'm not sure, but as he returns to, if he returns to Michigan next year, is he going to be with these 4 coaches on his staff? I think it's a legitimate question that does need to be asked, and good thing I am the one to ask it because that's why you guys are watching this show. But question to be asked, is it the staff as much as it is the system that Josh Gattis is trying to install, the power spread offense, the pro spread offense here at Michigan? Folks, Michigan is not playing this weekend. And somehow Michigan State, what we say, 14-point favorites? Michigan State's 14-point favorites over Illinois. I think I got to go put some money on the Illini, but I'm not sure if I'm going to because of all this trends. But nevertheless, if you were going to watch college football, watch NFL, put a little cash on the line, make it a little more enjoyable for yourself. You win a game, you take your lady or your gal or your guy out to a nice dinner Saturday or Sunday night. You do it with BetDSI, chatsports.com/bet. 120% deposit bonus, promo code GoBlue. You put in your first 100, you got an extra 120. Imagine if a bank set you up like that. Hey, let's deposit $1,000. Oh, well, here's an extra $1,200. Same kind of prospect here, although $500 is the max you can do to get $600 deposit bonus with BetDSI. Now we've got our last rumor, our last story here on a Friday as we're filming. And I saw this and it just pisses me off. Big talking Don Brown. Another just irritating thing I'm seeing with this Michigan coaching staff and the Michigan team under Jim Harbaugh. All talk and not enough action when it counts. And here's the quote that Don Brown said. When asked about Ohio State, it's another year, a different group. They, referring to Ohio State, better be careful now because we're hitting our stride too. This is a two-way street, and I know our guys will be ready in 3 weeks. Here's what I got to say about that, Don Brown. Do more, say less. Just like your colleague John Beilein had on the T-shirts a few years ago for the Michigan basketball team. Just shut the hell up. Until you beat Ohio State, anybody in Michigan, just don't talk. If they ask you about Ohio State, say, we're focused on our next game, or we respect the rivalry, because I'm going to say something here after you look at these stats of yards and points Don Brown's given up in his 3 years as Michigan's offensive coordinator going against Ohio State, 16, 17, and 18. Here's the stat. Don Brown is the only defensive coordinator in the history, I think it's 116 games coming up this year, maybe 117, whatever it is, the only D coordinator in the history of Michigan football to give up 30 points to Ohio State in 3 straight years. And maybe you should count 4 straight years since he gave up 30 in both halves last year. If you kind of break that in half, 31 points in the first half, 31 points in the second half, Don. Congratulations. You are performing the worst against Ohio State than any coordinator in history. But it's not just Don Brown. Jim Harbaugh, the only 3-game streak that's ever happened to giving up 30 points to Ohio State is the current 4-game streak that Michigan's on. They gave up 40-plus in Jim Harbaugh's first year in 15. So Harbaugh, as a coach, the only coach to give up 40 points to Ohio State, and not just 3 years, but also 4 years in the history, in the long storied history, 116 matchups between these two schools. So I ask you guys this question: will Michigan beat Ohio State? Thank you to me for potentially getting Chase Young ineligible, but for sure saving Charles Woodson's Heisman is the only defensive Heisman campaign. Gave Chase Young a little bit of cash, got him ineligible, so he can't win the Heisman Defensive Player. So shout out to me. Type M if Michigan's going to win. Type O if they will not win. Sarcasm, guys. I have to tell some people because they don't understand it. Who said that? All right, type M for yes, type O for no, and that is today's show. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. If you haven't yet, go ahead and hit this subscribe button. Get us to 6,000 subscribers ASAP so we could be in the big leagues of YouTube sports channels. While you're waiting, if you've got nothing better to do this weekend, watch our Michigan football report from Tuesday and Wednesday right here. Go Blue.